Na, not. Te, your. Gurukesha, Arjuna. Yasa Dharanam, of us who inherited the fame. Bada Anjale, one with folded hands. Vai, certainly. Bhayam, fear. Asti, there is. Kinchit, even a slight. Na, neither. Vartitaryam, can be allowed to live. Bhavata, by you. Katanchana, by all means. Kshetre, in the land. Madhye, in my kingdom. Tvam, you. Adharma Bandhu, the friend of irreligion. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. The king thus said, "We have inherited the fame of Arjuna. Therefore, since you have surrendered yourself with folded hands, you need not fear for your life. But you cannot remain in my kingdom, for you are the friend of irreligion." Please repeat. The king thus said, "We have inherited the fame of Arjuna. Therefore, since you have surrendered yourself with folded hands, you need not fear for your life. But you cannot remain in my kingdom, for you are the friend of irreligion." Purport. The personality of Kali, who is the friend of all kinds of religiosities, may be excused if he surrenders, but in all circumstances he cannot be allowed to live as a citizen in any part of a welfare state. The Pandavas were entrusted representatives of the personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna, who practically brought into being the battle of Kurukshetra, but not for any personal interest. He wanted an ideal king like Maharaj Yudhishthir and his descendants like Maharaj Parikshit to rule the world. Therefore, a responsible king like Maharaj Parikshit could not allow the friend of irreligiosity to flourish in his kingdom at the cost of the good fame of the Pandavas. That is the way of wiping out corruption in the state and not otherwise. Om Jnana-timirandasya Gyananjala-shalakaya Chakshumeritam Gena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripasindhubhya Vacha Pajtanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktavrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So we're continuing with the pastimes of Parikshit Maharaj at the onset of Kali Yuga. And three important points are being raised in this verse. The first point is that Arjuna inherited the fame of Arjuna. Parikshit inherited the fame of Arjuna. So what are the things that Parikshit inherited? What is that fame? Can we maybe mention a few of the things that he was famous for? Besides hearing Bhagavatam, because that comes later. Parikshit was famous. He inherited fame. What kind of fame? Yeah, he inherited the fame of Arjuna. So I wrote up a few things. First of all, he was the grandson of Arjuna, so he was famous for that. He was a successor to Yudhishthira, who was the ideal king. Krishna, it's mentioned in the purport here that it was Krishna's plan to install Yudhishthira as a ruler of the world. Krishna had come to take away the burden of the earth. So Parikshit was a successor to Yudhishthira. Parikshit was also the recipient of Krishna's special protection. Within the womb of his mother, he was protected by Krishna. He was also a vessel of good qualities. When he was traveling around in the kingdom, everyone started to glorify him. And actually they were also glorifying they were glorifying the Pandavas, Lord Krishna. It's mentioned by Srila Prabhupada, mentions also that Parikshit was only interested in hearing this glorification because it had some connection with Krishna. Otherwise he wouldn't have been interested in hearing about Yudhishthira and Arjuna and so on, if it hadn't been that they were devotees of Krishna. This Srila Prabhupada points out. Parikshit could see everything in connection with Krishna. And Prabhupada also writes has a very interesting way of putting this, how everything Parikshit considered is in relation to Krishna. There is nothing in the world with which the Lord is disconnected. The only thing we must learn is to excavate the source of connection and thus be linked to Him by offenseless service. Interesting choice of word, to excavate. So, just as Parikshit was always, he's known as the examiner, he's always trying to find Krishna in all situations. So similarly, Srila Prabhupada is urging us to excavate, to try to find Krishna's loving hand working in all situations and trying to bring conditioned souls back to Him. The other point mentioned, another one of his characteristics, Parikshit's characteristic, is that he was trained. He was trained in the principles of governance, administration. So it wasn't just by inheritance that he became famous, but also that he was qualified. It's not sufficient that one just be born in a family of Kshatriyas, that one will be recognized as a Kshatriya. No, one must be qualified. Those qualities are mentioned in Bhagavad Gita: heroism, courage in battle, determination, resourcefulness. And Parikshit definitely had these qualities. The other point mentioned is that he, in regards to fame, or in regards to inheritance, rather, not only did he inherited fame, but he inherited great wealth. We can just imagine the wealth that he inherited, being that he was the ruler of the whole planet. We can recall from the pastimes of Lord Yudhishthira preparing for the Rajasuya sacrifice. He was sent out along with his brothers to reclaim great amount of gold, treasures that were left behind by some king, I forget his name, so that this wealth could be used to prepare the sacrifice, because all these elaborate sacrifices require great wealth. Also, Parikshit, because he was recognized by his subject as being a qualified king, and foremost because of his offering protection. Srila Prabhupada mentions that the foremost duty of the administrators is to offer protection, not only to the human beings, but all the animals also, all the subjects. So Parikshit was highly qualified in that respect, and therefore he could easily exact taxes from the people. One other thing that Parikshit Maharaj inherited was great responsibility. So one may inherit fame, one may inherit wealth, but if such fame and such wealth is not being utilized for higher purposes, for the right purpose, in this case assisting all his subjects in going back home, back to Godhead, then one cannot claim the inheritance of good responsibility. One is not responsible. It says that one should not become a one who is a parent, one who is a teacher, spiritual master, has the responsibility of delivering his subjects, his disciples and students, delivering them from the cycle of birth and death. In a similar way, the king has this responsibility to make and that the Sudras are there assisting the other classes. So this is the responsibility of the king, to oversee these points. The second point in this verse is that Krishna offers, Parikshit offers protection to the surrendered souls. That is a characteristic of offering proper protection. One has to be able to discriminate how do we offer protection to a person. And in the beginning, when Parikshit observed that Kali was tormenting the bull and the cow, his immediate reaction was to, my responsibility is to kill him. And it would have been proper to kill him right there and then. But when the personality of Kali surrendered to him, Parikshit, being a man of great wisdom and understanding higher principles, knew that it is not proper for me to kill a surrendered soul. Even in the rules of fighting that were established before the Battle of Kurukshetra, there were certain rules that were being established, codes to follow in warfare. And if one, for example, didn't have a weapon, or if one ran away in fear from the battle, if one surrendered, such a person would not be killed. But the Kshatriya's duty was to protect, because there is always the opportunity that there can be some rectification. No matter how degraded conditioned soul has descended, there is still a glimmer of hope that such a person can be rectified, and such a person can continue one's advancement, especially in spiritual life. And we have so many examples of Srila Prabhupada offering his disciples chances again and again to engage in the process of Krishna consciousness, in spite of their having deviated. In this case, of course, Kali's protection wasn't, it's not being spoken of as trying to engage this person in Krishna consciousness. Rather, he simply protected and did not kill. He gave him protection by not killing him, basically. Kali feared for his life, and Parikshit Maharaj assured him that he could continue living. There's also a story where we all heard the story of the Agni, who had consumed too much ghee, right? Agni had consumed so much ghee that he had an upset stomach. And he disguised himself as a Brahmana and approached Arjuna and Krishna, who were out walking one day. And he asked them for help. And so Arjuna and Krishna agreed to help him. And Agni had requested that he required the herbs from the what was it, Kandava forest? The Kandava forest. So they had to burn the forest. Agni had to consume the forest by fire. And in trying to do so, of course, there was some opposition from Indra, because Indra was protecting some living entities in that forest. And a great battle ensued, where Arjuna is trying to allow Agni to consume the forest, and to the point where he actually even covers the whole forest with an umbrella-like arrangement of arrows, so that Indra couldn't quench the fire. Finally, in the end, Agni was able to burn the forest, and one living entity named Mayadanava escaped the flames, and he came before Krishna, and Krishna was just about to kill him. And so he took shelter of Arjuna. And so naturally, Arjuna protected him. As soon as he surrendered, he protected Mayadanava. And Mayadanava offered services to Arjuna, but Arjuna refused to accept charity, because it's not the business of the Kshatriyas to accept charity. The Kshatriya doesn't accept charity, he exacts taxes. That would be beneath him to accept charity. So then he requested, he basically instructed, gave him orders, go and help my brother Yudhishthira. In this way, Mayadanava went and constructed the assembly hall. So here we have an example also of Parikshit. Someone has come and surrendered to him. Okay, so now what is the proper course of action? So he has to dispense justice. The Kshatriya has to dispense justice. He has to see that the rules and regulations of proper conduct in society are being observed. So there was no way he was going to allow Kali to continue with his nefarious activities, especially when we consider that he was attacking the personality of religion and attacking the most important animal in society, the bull and the cow. I was just reflecting on how much disparity there is between our modern day culture and the culture existing at the time. Prabhupada speaks at length on this in his various purports, how administrators today are totally ignorant, totally ignorant of proper codes of conduct and offering protection. They have no understanding that all the animals are also their subjects and they need to be cared for. What to speak even of human beings. Wars are being exacted and just for the sake of power and for the sake of prestige. And so it's not surprising that we have a situation like we have today where this virus is spreading around the earth. And I was just hearing how there are so many you call it conspiracy theories going around, but there's not really much need to debate any of these conspiracy theories because we have the answers why these things are taking place. Bhagavatam is giving us, it's not surprising that this is all happening. We have a culture where innocent animals are being slaughtered being brought to the slaughterhouses by the millions all over the world daily. And there's so much corruption in administration, and there's so much ignorance in terms of spiritual leadership worldwide. There's a great lack of understanding the basic principles of religiosity. So it's not surprising that we have a situation where the earth is going through some cleansing. Going through some cleansing. Unfortunately, at the great cost of lives and great suffering. So, here we have the antidote, is to take shelter of the guidelines, the guidance given in the Srimad Bhagavatam. So Kali has to decide, okay, well now, how I'm going to deal with this character. Kali is creating great disruption in the kingdom. Actually, Parikshit was very, very surprised when he saw this. How could this take place in my kingdom? And so there was consideration of the religious principles. There's a great concern of Parikshit that the innocent people will be contaminated by the effects of Kali. Just like we're taking many measures to protect ourselves from contamination from this virus, certain things we have to do. So similarly, Parikshit's concern is we've got to keep this Kali virus away from here. And therefore, we're going to put him in quarantine somewhere. So he's going to be sending off Kali to a different part of the kingdom. Basically putting him into exile. So the final decision was to ban him. So Parikshit is responding. Parikshit, one of his qualities also has great knowledge. And Prabhupada mentions in one of the purports, previous purports, when Bhumi was lamenting Krishna's disappearance, and she started to list all his qualities, many of Krishna's qualities, and one of them was knowledge. And there are subdivisions to this knowledge. One was knowledge of everything. Krishna has knowledge of everything. He understands also how to act according to time, place, and circumstance. And of course, the most important one of all was knowledge of the self. And so in this case, Parikshit is also considering the situation in terms of time, place, and circumstance. And so this protection of the lives of both humans and animals is the first and foremost duty of the government, Prabhupada points out. So how do we implement these instructions? Of course, when we speak of government, is my understanding that the prime necessity, the main necessity that was being offered in the establishment of Krishna consciousness movement was that Srila Prabhupada wanted to establish a Brahminical culture. So granted that we don't have governments in place, yes, we have a society and it's growing, but there is still a very, very important need to establish a Brahminical Krishna consciousness. So, because the world at large is definitely a challenge to try to infiltrate society and establish rules of conduct. It could be a very, very delicate, confrontational way of governing. I mean, to try to expect governments to immediately shut down slaughterhouses, prostitution, intoxication, and so on, that message will land on ears in general. Society is simply still not very much receptive to this. Of course, it is changing. There are gradual changes, and that change is coming about by disseminating this knowledge, by disseminating this sound vibration through Sankirtan, the distribution of literature, through through prayer. You have the example of Advaita Charya Prabhu. The situation was very difficult. There was a lot of bad influence in the culture, and Advaita Charya was simply considering, how is it possible to change this? So through his prayer, he was praying for Lord Krishna to manifest, and he came as Lord Chaitanya. So we can't underestimate the power also of collective prayer. And in this way, those who have inclinations for governance, administration, may be inspired by the directions given from the Shastras and through the disciplic succession. So 3 points again being mentioned here. Parikshit inheriting the fame, wealth, and responsibilities, and Parikshit offering protection to a surrendered soul, and Parikshit dispensing justice, proper justice according to time, place, and circumstance. We'll stop here. Any questions or comments? Ms. Mathura? It might not be on there. I heard it at one point. Look at the green light. See if the green
Where's
light's
the green
on?
light?
On top.
On top here?
Yeah, there should be a green
By the
light.
button. Oh, there it's on.
There we go.
There. Well, yeah, you said, yeah, I mean, the common man in the world today, they say, they have a saying, especially mechanics, if it's not broken, don't fix it. So there's nothing really broken about the Hare Krishna movement. Maybe we're not following the manual given by our Acharya, Srila Prabhupada, carefully enough. Of course, there's time, place, and circumstance, like you said, so that consideration's there. You know, how do we preach in this place or this time? That's always there. You know, it's going to be a little different, obviously, wherever you go, but it seems to me, you know, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was Krishna himself, and he gave a very powerful going out and broadcasting Harinam to the masses. And who could say, like, how transforming that's been since the inception of this movement in the 60s, Srila Prabhupada started, of changing people's consciousness. Although, and actually it's said, Hare Krishna became a household word, because people turned in the major cities, they were the Hare Krishnas. And then they thought about Krishna. And really, by that Nam Sankirtan, it really infiltrated society, purified a lot of people's minds and changed their hearts. So along with the book distribution and college preaching and prasadam, and Prabhupada wanted actually to flood people with prasadam to give them another higher taste in taking Krishna directly and understanding I don't need to eat meat, like that. And anyway, I just thought I'd just throw that in.
Yeah, of course, the essential activities are ever fresh. Distributing the knowledge, chanting the holy name. So the means may vary, and the means will change with time. Undoubtedly, they change. I mean, with the development of technology, for example, now there's so much preaching going on over the internet. I mean, imagine what Srila Prabhupada would have been able to do then with the internet. So his disciples are carrying on, his disciples and grand disciples are carrying on now in so many ways. So many wonderful books are being written, expanding devotees' realizations. So the movement is definitely alive and well. But knowing that it's going on and very strong, nevertheless, this is not, we don't want to become complacent. And so the question always comes back to ourselves, well, how can I serve? How can I improve my service? So when individuals also, if I go through my own personal, if I examine my own situation, my progress, any development, spiritual development, then that creates an opportunity for me to want to associate with other devotees and hear from them. But if I don't spend the time really evaluating my progress, then there may not be any incentive to want to progress further. So that's natural. If I want to grow spiritually, and I examine myself through the light of the scriptures, then naturally I will want to associate with others, and in this way can grow, and in this way collectively things develop. It's not simply it's like waiting for someone to do it for me. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. So the responsibility lies with myself. Yes, Mathura?
Just that the Prabhupada, he made I think it's a famous statement at his work which disappeared. He said, please increase without giving. Please increase. He said, but at the minimum, please maintain it. Please maintain it. And I think it's a fine line between trying to see how I can contribute a little different from the ways I learned how to, because I think it needs to be changed a bit. So I think it's a fine line, not to deviate too much from what we've learned from our spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada. And he also gave a last thing, he gave an interesting Bengali saying. He said, do something new, do something new. Stand on your head if you have to, do something new. He said, the problem my question disciples is, number one, you like to fight amongst each other. Yeah, the second thing is you like to change things. That's what.
So Mathura is mentioning that Srila Prabhupada made statements how disciples, they like to fight amongst each other and also like to make changes. So he wanted them to increase. When we speak of changes, or when I spoke of change, there's a difference between changing the principles or changing the essence and making and packaging something differently according to the recipient. When presenting someone, if you give somebody, well, the classic example, the doctor gives medicine to a child, and if the medicine is very bitter, and sometimes they'll sugarcoat it, so the child can accept it, and then he gets the benefit of the essence. So does that mean, well, now that person's made a change? And it's not valid to make such a change. Just give him the medicine, but he won't take it if it's bitter. So unfortunately, the conditioned soul cannot recognize the sweetness of devotional service. So therefore, yes, sometimes there's need of some sugar coating. But we don't want to do it at the expense of the essence. And that's where the spiritual principles, the basic rules and regulations are very important, and we don't want to deviate from those. For example, Srila Prabhupada says, or statements, Lord Chaitanya says, there's no hard and fast rules for chanting the holy names. How many rules and regulations do we have for chanting the holy names? So sounds like a contradiction. So many rules and regulations for chanting the holy name. And yet Lord Chaitanya says there are no hard and fast rules for chanting the holy name. How do we explain that? Srila Prabhupada, Lord Chaitanya, we could picture Lord Chaitanya speaking to multitudes. There are no hard and fast rules for chanting the holy names. Srila Prabhupada is speaking with a disciple about chanting the holy names. A very close disciple. I guarantee you there will be a lot of rules and regulations. But what are the rules and regulations for? To assist us, to help us get the essence of the holy name. So there's, Srila Prabhupada made many changes coming from the culture, from where he came, from the culture he came. He adopted several changes. But it's not done whimsically. All right. All glories to Srila Prabhupada, all glories to Srimad Bhagavatam. Thank you very much.